In the summer of 1963, the air in Birmingham, Alabama felt heavier than usual, not just with heat, but with tension. The city was known across America not for its beauty or charm, but for its resistance to change. It was one of the most segregated cities in the United States, a place where hope struggled to breathe. 17-year-old Elijah Carter had grown up in that tension. Born and raised in Birmingham's black neighborhood of Smithfield, he knew the rules of survival. Don't make eye contact with the wrong people, step aside when told, and never question authority, especially if it wore a badge. His mother, Ruth Carter, worked long hours as a domestic worker, cleaning houses in neighborhoods she could never live in. She worried constantly about Elijah. "Stay away from trouble," she would say every morning. "We don't need more problems." Elijah would nod, but his heart was already somewhere else. It was in the streets. By May of that year, Birmingham had become the center of the civil rights movement. Thousands of black citizens, many of them young students, began marching in peaceful protest against segregation. They were demanding equal rights, something that should have been theirs all along. Elijah watched from a distance at first. He saw children his age being arrested, dragged into police trucks, sprayed with fire hoses so powerful they could tear bark off trees. He saw police dogs unleashed on peaceful protesters, and still, they marched. One afternoon, Elijah couldn't stay away any longer. He joined them. The crowd gathered outside the 16th Street Baptist Church, a place that had become the heart of the movement. People sang hymns, their voices rising together in defiance and hope. "We shall overcome," they sang. Elijah stood among them, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper: purpose. When they began marching, he walked with them, step by step. It didn't take long for the police to arrive. The scene quickly turned chaotic. Officers shouted orders, fire hoses blasted into the crowd, dogs barked and lunged, people screamed, scattered, fell. Elijah tried to stay upright as the force of the water knocked people around him to the ground. He grabbed the arm of a young girl who had fallen beside him and pulled her up. "Run!" he shouted, but there was nowhere to run. Within minutes, Elijah was arrested along with dozens of others. They were shoved into a police truck and taken to a crowded jail. Inside, the air was thick and suffocating. Yet something remarkable happened. No one cried, no one begged. Instead, they sang. Days turned into a blur inside that cell. Elijah lost track of time, but he never lost his resolve. News of the protests and the violent response began spreading across the country. Images appeared in newspapers, shocking people who had never truly understood what life was like in places like Birmingham. The movement was growing, and the world was watching. After several days, Elijah was released. When he stepped outside, the sunlight felt different, brighter. But the city had changed too. There was anger now, on both sides. And then came September 15th. That morning, Elijah was at home when he heard the explosion. It shook the ground beneath his feet. Windows rattled, birds scattered into the sky. Within minutes, word spread: the 16th Street Baptist Church had been bombed. Elijah ran. When he arrived, the scene was devastating. Smoke filled the air, debris covered the ground. People cried, screamed, searched. 4 young girls had been killed. 4. They had been getting ready for Sunday service. The city erupted in grief and rage. For Elijah, something inside him broke that day. The peaceful songs, the hopeful marches, they suddenly felt fragile in the face of such hatred. That night, he sat with his mother in silence. "Is it worth it?" he finally asked. Ruth looked at him, her eyes filled with both pain and strength. "Yes," she said softly, "because if we stop now, then nothing changes." Weeks passed. The protests continued, but so did the violence. Yet something had shifted, not just in Birmingham, but across the entire nation. People were paying attention. Leaders in Washington could no longer ignore what was happening. And slowly, change began to take shape. One evening in November, Elijah stood at the Birmingham train station. He held a small suitcase in his hand. He had made a decision. He was leaving. Not to escape, but to continue the fight in a different way. He had been accepted into a college in the north, one that welcomed black students and believed in equality. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was a responsibility. His mother stood beside him. "I'm proud of you," she said. Elijah swallowed hard. "I'll come back." "I know," she replied. As the train pulled into the station, Elijah took one last look at the city that had shaped him. Birmingham, a place of pain, a place of courage, a place that had changed him forever. The train began to move, slowly at first, then faster. Elijah sat by the window, watching as the city faded into the distance. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was part of something bigger, something historic, something real. Years later, when people would speak of the civil rights movement, they would remember the marchers, the leaders, the laws that changed the nation. But they would also remember the young people, the ones who stood up, the ones who marched, the ones who sang in jail cells, the ones who refused to accept injustice. People like Elijah Carter. Because history isn't just written by famous names, it's written by ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things. And sometimes, all it takes is one step forward to change the course of a nation.